Okay, I guess this right here we're looking at is Indonesia. Most of you probably recognize it. That's what you would pretty much call, and its islands and things there in the blue part. If we were looking at the other colored part, we'd probably call it Australasia or something along that line. But we're focusing on a certain point here and a place right out here in an area known as Sunda Strait that's out in the South China Sea, below South China Sea, where we call the Java Sea, and so on. And we're zooming in slowly here to see an area that's the strait of where two islands come together. And whenever we zoom back just a hair, we can see a continental shelf here, and all this area right in here is pretty much within 400 feet to the surface or less, rendering it tropical waters like off Florida, and it has its blue area around it that would have been exposed a long time ago. And if we were to look at this, we can see this huge area that would have been referred to as the ancient area of Mu. But this plate here and this uprising that they have, and then this is the Indian Ocean, and Sri Lanka off India, and Egypt is just over here to the left. But if we zoom in back where we were going, find an area that I used to get a whole bunch of fish from for really Bali's right there, that I was a main shipper. And we're looking at Sulawesi Islands here in Indonesia, Borneo, and right up there's Philippines, Singapore, and Indian Ocean fish. And there is oddities in the hobby where there are certain fish you just get from here over in the Indian Ocean, other ones you just get in the Indian Ocean. There are certain fish from the Red Sea are a slight variation of difference. Our people have found that they live a whole lot longer than the ones that they get out in other places due to catching methods and all kinds of things that are done to them. Here's Christmas Island Cocos, one of the Cocos in the world. There's at least three that are pretty famous, but are knownable type things. But where we're getting in on here is an area, and if you look at the picture in the top left hand corner, you can see it. It is Krakatoa. And I can tell you a lot about fish and the corals and everything that come from here. I might do a couple of videos that are about that, but I figured I would get through a lot of these other things. But since we're all in catastrophism, and I've been stuck on recently talking about Younger Dryas event, the cometary impact, and the cometary or meteors and things like that that are going on, I thought I'd give another example of what we could be talking about as far as catastrophes to people and things that happen, and probably on a much smaller scale than you think. We've zoomed way down here on this little island that are set up here, and one of these little bumps here is this little island here with a volcano in the middle of it. And it seems like it's not that big of a deal, right? And it's really not. And over here on the other side of the world, what the hell, it could blow up for all you care, right? Well, not necessarily. For if we get in on this thing right here, we'll find that it kind of has an appearance that looks a little like Minoan Crete, and that little center of it and the islands that go around it, right? And we're going to leave the little Google map here and just go to what they say on Krakatoa and its map. Same place, same situation, same deal. Here's where we are in the world. There's everywhere else. Philippines up here and so on. Thailand up in the corner. South China Sea. Australia down. But if we most people know that Krakatoa has exploded, and it's famous. And one thing that you notice there is that the little islands there, and then Sumatra was the one that was just left and going up, and so a little northwest and going up, and then east of this island we were showing, it was showing east of its islands we were showing was Java. But you may have known that there's a famous romance with this area, thinking about it as being so primitive and a land that time forgot and all this, and there might be a island out there with King Kong on it and all kinds of BS going on back in the day. And because of that, there was this thing that came out, and what was funny was Krakatoa east of Java, and that's the name of it. And I did a video about it a while back, and it was one of the ones that cross-linked, so I'm trying to do ones that are related to those, but this is kind of hitting it for a different version, and we could hit what we're going to talk about in a few little subjects here with a few different ways, and maybe I'll just feel like they're all knocked out, or we'll understand it whenever I bounce back on them and ideas. But when we talk about volcanic effects, we could be talking about something as much as this that happened too, that people are well aware of, most, and if you're not, welcome, and if you are, I'm sorry if it's all stuff that you know, but hey, let's point out something that you may not know about it, or whatever. Krakatoa is a caldera. Now, a caldera is a large cauldron-like hollow that forms whenever a volcano blows up, and so that's where they kind of get the name from. And it's where you pretty much blow off the top of a mountain that's left with a crater. And it can be still a kind of a top of a mountain with a crater in it, all the way to the point that it blows it up into the ground. And everything that was there gets thrown out and up into the atmosphere rapidly. And one famous one that people probably don't think of is Yellowstone. Yellowstone is a giant caldera, and that's just a mega one waiting to happen, if you will. But it's in Sunda Strait between the islands of Java and Sumatra in the Indonesia province of Lampung. The caldera is part of volcanic island groups called Krakatoa Archipelago, comprising of 4 islands, give or take whichever time we're talking about, 2 of which laying in Vertland are remnants of previous volcanic edifice destroyed in eruptions long before the famous 1883 eruption. And in the 1883 eruption, we could look at, you're going to do that to me, 1883 eruption, here was where it had blown off part of the whole island that was there, and whenever they came, there were supposedly 4 separate fires going on in different places, and it was all pretty much gone, right? People got hummus out of it and stuff. I remember seeing a thing a long time ago where a guy thought he was famous because he had a piece of hummus from Krakatoa, right? So it was kind of a thing for a while, a little bit of knowing about it and stuff. And in the 1883 eruption, there caused the year without summer, that some people call it, and so on. And there was another version of this that it came much earlier, and we're about to talk about that also. And things that happen whenever it's this little world without a summer type thing. In 1927, a 4th island, and that Krakatoa, or child of Krakatoa, boom, there's some lava, emerged from the caldera formed in 1883, and there had been new eruptive activity since the late 20th century, with a large collapsing causing a deadly tsunami in 2018, if y'all remember hearing about that. So it has historical significance in the fact of it being a massive explosion that happened August 26th and 27th of 1883, which were the most volcanic events in recorded history that we have recorded with us being experienced to it. In a time shortly before this, whenever it was on the other side of the world and people weren't even going there in the farthest trades and travels, rarely you would not have known about it or so on, and get back into BC and times and things like that, and it really is going to be a rare chance, if you will, of knowing about it, or land people maybe knowing about it, and or if there was a rare travel back then. So they say it's about 6 times the size of Hiroshima's bomb. And I'm not going to read this whole thing to you. But according to Dutch East Indies, whenever it blew up in 1885, 165 villages were gone, destroyed, damaged. At least 36,000 people or more were killed and many injured. And where's it here? Yeah, they announced the height of an Iraq Krakatoa was over 1,300 foot from nothing, built up, burping up out of the sea level. Following a collapse, though, in December 820, the height was reduced only to 120 meters, and it caused a little mini tsunami. And around the corner from this, up Sumatra, which we're looking at, which, you know, we're in this little red square, and here's Banda Aceh, and where it let loose the tsunami, which affected all the way down here and across the Indian Ocean and so on. But they tell you at some point in prehistory, an earlier caldera-forming eruption had occurred, leaving as remnants those 3 places, Verlaten, Lang, and what they call Polish Hat. And if we look at it here, not going to let me do it. If we look at it here, there, I guess you can see. One of them was built up to the point that it was like a Polish hat, some type of Phrygian cap, and maybe it had a little whoomp at the very top of it and looked like something like Dr. Zeus. People said, oh, it's the inspiration for this, that, and the other, and the Grinch and everything up. Let's just look at this and how much that looks like Crete and everything going on. You can still see the choo-choo, puff, puff, puff going out of the middle of it right here. It's still a volcano. And it's a third of the world away from Hawaii. But this was formed in the same way, because this is that critical meeting part where they go together. And they say this is a little weakness part in the crust, so whenever it does its little thing and breaks it up, it's letting stuff up, and so it just seeped out and made a giant island. It's tried to come out of the center of that and blow up. But also over the period of time now, just like Hawaii, it's trying to scoot and move, and in the process, it pushes up and it can't find the same spot. It makes a bulge, and then it releases. And that's, I guess, in the simplest of effects of what happens. Right. These 2 islands are separated by the Sunda Strait, located at a bend in the axis of the island's arc. Krakatoa is directly above the subduction zone of the Eurasian Plate and the Australasian Plate, where the plate boundaries make sharp change in direction, possibly resulting in an unusual weak in the crust. And so we were talking about these eruptions that had happened in 1883, but there's more to it than that. For the Javanese books of Kings record that in the year 338 of Saka, which is 416 AD, the 416 AD event, that there was a thundering sound, and they ended up having the volcano let loose and a glowing fire which reached the sky. Right? It's what they came out of the last named mountain. The whole world was greatly shaken. To all the people around there, accompanied by heavy rainstorms. Not only this heavy rain extinguished the eruption of the fire of the mountain Kapi, but it augmented the fire, whose noise was the last of the mountain Kapi. A tremendous roar burst into pieces and sank into the deepest of the earth, the water of the sea, and inundated in the land, the country to the east of the Mount Batwara, the mountain Rishava. And there have been people that have said accounts like this could have been what was taken as the account of uh, Atlantis and stuff, because they knew something great had happened and it caused all these problems to people. But I'm not trying to relate that to it here. But what I do want to make note of is these two other events here. There's the 535 AD event in 1680. And this is part of the little winter that we had going on all the way through, you know, the campaigns of Waterloo and the harsh winters they had there, through harsh winters that kept going on and are recorded all the way through Washington crossing the Delaware pretty much. And so looking at this, David Keyes, Ken Waltz, and others have postulated that a violent volcanic eruption, possibly of Krakatoa in 535, may be responsible for the global climate changes of 535-536. Key explores what he believes to be the radical, far-ranging global effects of such a putative 6th century eruption in his book, Catastrophe, an investigation into the origins of the modern world. This eruption was believed to have been even more violent than the 1883 eruption, as it was pretty much the one that blew it all up and left 3 pieces that had grown back, that made that 1883 that's grown back now, right? And also the one that created Krakatoa's original caldera, which resulted in the creation of those islands. However, there are other explanations for the climate change, including eruption of Galapagos in El Salvador. We're going to talk about that in a minute and see what it shows. Boom. Well, yeah, this Lake Galapagos, this is actually a huge caldera in itself, and it blew up at exactly the same time. And it's right down, not just above Panama, and it actually tried to screw everything off too. And the Mayan civilization and stuff, and they noticed that it had been held back for over 100 years. There are people who've done tree ring growth correlations. Thornton mentions that Krakatoa was known as the Fire Mountain during Java's Sailendra dynasty, which records of 7 eruption events between the 9th and 16th century. These have been tentatively dated as 850, 950, 1050, 1150, 1350, and 1530. So but they weren't giant events. They were build-ups, and then it would wait, and then you go, oh no, it hadn't been going off. What's going on? Boom. And depending on how much it waits, it appears as how much the boom. But then, of course, once it blows the head off of it, it's got to start all over, right? And it was visited by the HMS Discovery and Resolution on the way back home after Captain Cook's death in Hawaii, and which is built very much the same way. He stopped by for a few days in Krakatoa. They found a fresh water and a hot spring on the island, described the natives who then lived on the island as friendly, and made several sketches in his journal. John Layard calls the island Coco Terra, which would not quite be the right one. Visited by the U.S. Peacock, and so on. So this 1883 eruption here, and it was felt violently and heard. It was the shot heard around the world, pretty much. Heard over 3,000 kilometers or 2,000 miles away, basically. In Perth, Australia, and all over the world. As a great explosion, which just seemed to come from that area. On days there was no rain or anything that happened, but just this whoa, they heard, and it was said by everybody to be indifferent. They knew something happened, and a lot of times, of course, way back then, it was years sometimes before people put correlations together and ideas. But the combined pyroclastic flows, volcanic ashes, pyroclastic flows, that's whenever it just lets loose and starts to flow down the side of the mountain, and it can take and just envelop and take something out, like what happened in Mount St. Helens. which apparently if you just build right up against it, like say, oh, if you build right here, a place called Pompeii, then whenever it happens, it just wah, and just encased it. People and all, in pose, totally. So volcanic ash and tsunamis had disastrous results in the region and worldwide. The death toll recorded by the Dutch authorities was 16,000, although some sources put it at 120,000. But worse than that, what are the effects of it? And I think they've got biological research, botanicals. Where in the world is it here that it shows a list of it where I went to before? Because I thought I would get to that and go just past and then do it, but I didn't catch it on the way down. But it basically says it's thought to be a cause of changes for the time of all these people. And this earlier date, not the 1883, strangely seems to correlate with the Justinian plague. And people have made the connection years ago. You may have not heard about it, but it seems to have been at 535 then, and global climate changes of 535, 536. Here we go. And so basically affect happening episodes of cooling in the northern hemisphere, and the most extreme event of the last 2,000 years. This is said to have, you know how they say the little ice age was said to have put something back on the glaciers and everything back at a time. This was said to have done it worse, but then it melted back away. So you can imagine that that just kind of staved off what we're dealing with today and the way people are acting. But if they wouldn't have staved that off, then it would have happened about 400 or 500 years ago with those two colder events that happened. And then we would already be at the pretty much maximum we're going to be at, which has happened every other ice age, whenever we weren't even on the planet. No big deal, right? Well, it is a big deal. We're affecting the planet, and we're getting to where there's 7 billion, 8 billion people, and it just keeps getting worse. But and by worse, it's just putting a load on the planet, basically. And people are going to have to start worrying about that. The Byzantine historian Procopius recorded in 536 AD in his report, "The Wars with the Vandals. During this year, most dread portent to look for place. The sun gave forth its light without brightness, so the entire year was dark. It seemed exceedingly like the sun in eclipse, for the beams it shed were not even clear. There was a failure of the bread, as it was called, failure of the bread of the years 536 to 539, so it caused a period of problems. Low temperatures, even snow during the summer. Snow reported fell in August in China during the northern and southern dynasties, which caused the harvest there to be delayed and or fail. Widespread crop failures, and we're talking about by everybody. A drenched dry fog was reported in the Middle East, China, and in Europe, as we spoke about there in the higher channels, and other places. Drought in Peru, which affected the Moshe culture. And this is the guys that apparently had beards, and they had their little gods done with beards or whatever, and they did not make it past this point, it seemed, and they drastically affect them, and they may have been taken over by the Aztec and Mayas past that point. A lot of people are making assumptions about that. Tree ring analysis. So dendrochronologist Mike Bale of the Queen's University of Belfast shows abnormally little growth in Irish oak in 536 and another sharp drop in 542 after a partial recovery. between the two. So it was like affected and then affected. There's another little ditch right there, but in between there, and there's a sharp point apparently from reading things on it. The tree rings from Sweden, Finland, California, Sierra Nevada, and rings from the Chilean Fitzroy trees. Ice cores from the Greenland and Antarctica show evidence of substantial sulfate deposits around 534 plus or minus 2 years, which is evidence for an extensive acidic dust veil. It has been conjectured that the changes were caused by ashes or dust thrown into the air after eruption of a volcano, or as volcanic winter, or the impact of a comet or a meteorite. The evidence of sulfate deposits in ice cores strongly supports the volcano hypothesis, and I think we made a correlation here all with it, but it's literally called the year without a summer back here in the climatic aberration of 1816, known as the year without a summer, which has been connected to the explosion of volcanic Tambora. So kick back and everything back on, well, there's the 1883, but then what about this one? Because we know 1883 was a deep affected, and then look at what happens from this other time also. So through here though, and you can go in and pick this up. You can see where I'm picking it up. It's just wiki I'm going off and stuff I'm going off of. But Dallas Abbott, Columbia University, said that there were comet impacts probably that caused the haze. Spherules found in the ice might originate from terrestrial debris ejected into the atmosphere by an impact event. After looking through the whole data though, it looks like it could have been a combination, and who knows, but there seems to have been more of the volcanic index that's been going with it, and since we know now that there pretty much was their volcanic events that were going off during that exact time, it seems to correlate with it exactly. So the 536 event ensuing famine may have been suggested as an explanation for the deposition of hoards of gold by Scandinavian elites at the end of the migration period that they talk about, which, man, if I can get you on that picture right there, it's amazing how much migration they show in that. And we've talked about quite a bit of it, how Proto-Indo-Europeans had come in, and how these Huns, who were listed as Germans, and the original Huns, how they were Germans, and so on, right? Visigoths, everybody, Vandals spreading out of Carthage. The gold was possibly a sacrifice to appease the gods and get the sunlight back. It was called Fulbelwinter, and Ragnarok are theories to be based on the cultural memory of the event. Fumbelwinter is the year without a summer. Basically what it means in their language, let's see, what is it? Means great winter, or longer winter. And so, you know, didn't get much out of this summer, started early, went all the way through, didn't have much of a summer. And then they say Ragnarok was going to be something that came out of that. We know the Ragnarok story and how the great ending of it's supposed to be, and how they've made it into a comic book thing, but this was something totally different than the real telling of the story. This also was the decline of Teotehuacan, huge city in Mesoamerica, close to this, and is associated with the droughts related with climate changes, the signs of civil unrest and famines. In fact, it looks like in the whole area, if you go into the article about it, and I don't want to do it, it'll just stretch it out for you, but if you go in the article about it, it talks about civil wars and things that all went on then due to probably crops failing and so on, and that probably was the downfall of them pretty much. And it shows you the dating, and then over 100 years they didn't do anything worth a damn, and then because of that and losing the generation that was doing it so well, we're starting to, or they got replaced by somebody. It ends up being a much lesser build, and things went downhill from there. And so things aren't always an upstep if you have a hiccup. But a book written by David Key speculates that the climate changes contributed to various developments, such as the emergence of the plague of Justinian. And the Justinian plague was a pandemic that affected the Byzantine Empire and especially its capital in Constantinople, as well as the Sasanian Empire and port cities around the entire Mediterranean. Merchant ships harbored rats that carried fleas infected with the plague, and it took off. And it's believed to have killed as much as half of the people there. They were saying that people were getting estimates and trying to put it together, and upwards of 1 million people easily dying. And then the people that did a report on that said that was a confining area, and it wasn't considering anybody out of here that got affected and what happened after that to people although there and over here either. It's really pretty much a huge thing that looks like it was triggered by it due to the famine and then weakness of people due to that and things that happened out of it. And so we're lucky we're running along pretty healthy as a people whenever we ran into the last little flu thing. But as you can see, animals sometimes caused it, with us having domesticated chickens and getting these chicken pox and flus and animal related diseases and things that go off of it. Well, we get pretty well immune to it, but man, if something like this kicks off, it can make something like that happen. And the Great Famine of 1513, we could go into the Minoan eruption, but let's just take a quick look at that and how it runs a crater around it and the little center peak that's on it. The only difference is Krakatoa still continues to be active and get going, whereas Crete has calmed down quite a bit. But it makes you wonder how often things cause problems like that. Comet smashes triggered ancient famine. Well, I'm going to check that out. I'll let you know if there's anything good in that. Damn, I got to accept cookies. 1,500 years ago, 536. Oh, this was the article where the guy was thinking that it even could have to do with a comet impact. Anyhow, guys, like, share, and subscribe, and enjoy. And we'll get on to other things. But I guess what I was trying to show you here is that times whenever great tragedy have happened in the past, and you make you wonder what happened to the end of the Bronze Age and stuff like that. Whenever Crete blew up, it affected that whole area so incredibly and caused great migrations to go around, and some people left and went to greener pastures. Some people left their greener pastures to go somewhere and try to find a way to live. But that had happened a long time ago too. And then there had been catastrophes before, like in 10,000 BC we keep talking about. And this is a different one to show you a different side of that. And so when people try to say, oh, you're a catastrophist or whatever, it's like, well, now I'm a realist. I'm just looking at what supposedly happened. I mean, these are catastrophes, and it really happened. Peace.